Hey everyone, in this video we're going to answer a question that we got from a viewer. They were asking us to kind of explain our thoughts on saturated versus unsaturated fats and also explain why polyunsaturated fatty acids are so toxic. And so I guess the best place to start this one is to disagree with that latter statement about PUFAs, polyunsaturated fats, being toxic. They aren't toxic. I think that that's just an erroneous wordplay that's used.
That's been perpetuated by repeat fans and the paleo community.
Yeah, and they're almost, unanimously referring to industrial seed oils, things like soybean oil, corn oil, cottonseed oil, at times canola oil, sunflower and safflower oils.
The paleo community.
Yeah, basically oils that are high in omega-6 polyunsaturated fatty acids. Those are toxic. Ones that are high in omega-3 polyunsaturated fatty acids, which are going to be, basically your seafoods, and then certain seed oils that are high in a different type of omega-3. But regardless of what you're looking at when it comes to polyunsaturated fatty acids, they are not toxic to the body. That's just ridiculous. If you consume them in too great of quantities, it can be deleterious to your body because those fatty acids, whether they're omega-3 or omega-6, get incorporated into cell membranes. And if you consume a ridiculous amount of them, then those cell membranes become much too fluid and they don't have enough structural basis, and it can cause problems with cell signaling and cell integrity. And generally speaking, the threshold for that effect is about 10% of calories. You want to keep your total polyunsaturated fat intake to less than 10% of your calories to avoid that from occurring. But they're not toxic. And even these industrial seed oils that are rich in linoleic acid, they aren't toxic. And I mean, a lot of people will point to inflammation kind of as like the standard, like this is why you shouldn't consume them. It promotes inflammation when you consume these seed oils. And that idea is based on the fact that by and large, omega-6 fatty acids turn into pro-inflammatory mediators in the body, while omega-3 are largely anti-inflammatory. But when you look at randomized controlled trials and meta-analyses of these studies, adding these seed oils into people's diets and comparing them to things like olive oil, flax oil, and other either high monounsaturated fatty acid oils or high omega-3 fatty oils, it doesn't increase markers of inflammation. CRP, interleukins, TNF-alpha, none of these increase in response to interventions that actually add those oils into the diet. So, I mean, the mechanistic basis is there, but it just doesn't seem to play out that way. Now, if you throw in, yeah, I know, right? If you throw like
that's a mouthful.
Yeah, and so we also have to keep practicality.
That's also why we haven't touched on this. It's a very in-depth topic. Right?
It's very complex, and a lot of people forget about kind of the practicalities too.
And you're kind of opening a can of worms, like I said before. Yeah. Like there is diet like zealots, like in the repeat crowd, in the paleo community, that will just argue with you just on the basis that their ideas are being challenged.
Yeah.
With that, and so that's kind of why stay out of it. Like fats are kind of a huge argument in the dieting world.
Yeah, they are. And
it's really just excess. That's how I see it. Like it's excess fats.
Yeah.
In general, all excess fats, like even saturated fats in excess, I think cause problems for people. So.
Well, yeah, and that's the kind of practical aspect I think a lot of people overlook is it's like, look, if you take like a cup or even like a half of a cup of some industrial seed oil and you add that into your diet every day, it's probably not the best choice.
Which is happening if you're eating a shit ton of French fries, friends.
Yeah, it is.
Like that's
but I mean, even if you take their, fish oils and you add a half a cup of fish oils in your diet, you're going to run into the like very, very similar problems. You're going to have immunosuppression. You're going to have excessively fluid cell membranes. It's just not going to be healthy. right? And so then let's say you do just keep your polyunsaturated fats kind of on the more minimal side. The only two options left are saturated or monounsaturated. Which should you choose? Well, here again, we run into this mechanistic argument where saturated fats increase your LDL particle counts. So I'm not talking about LDL cholesterol, okay? I'm talking about actual LDL particles, which is the strongest independent risk factor for heart disease that exists. It increases that, and by virtue of increasing LDL, it is associated with heart disease risk. But not all foods affect in the same way.
Yeah, and a small amount increases like mitochondrial function. So I think that there is some utility in a small amount in the diet.
Sure, and also...
and that's with everything, like we're saying, too much or too little. Like you have to strike a balance. And
yeah, well, the other part too is what foods are supplying them. So best example in this is dairy fat is like 80 to 90% saturated fat. And things like butter are consistently associated with higher LDL counts. Cheese, when equated to the fat content of butter, does not affect blood lipids at all, because the food matrix of cheese changes the way that the saturated fat interacts in the body. And in fact, cheese supplies something called the milk fat globule membrane, which actually alters cholesterol genes related to cholesterol metabolism in the liver, so that your LDL particle counts aren't affected. And so when you're talking about saturated fat, I mean, you can't just look at these mechanisms. You also have to look at the foods supplying them. And then even you have to take a step back and look at the overall dietary pattern and the health of the person eating them, right? Like if somebody came to me and their LDL was like 200 and they're eating a bunch of saturated fat, I would say, you know, one of the first steps, let's just reduce your saturated fat, because based on the preponderance of evidence, that's likely going to lower their LDL. But if you have someone that has, you know, good LDL, let's say it's between like 70 and 100 milligrams per deciliter, and they come to me and they're like, hey, I want to, you know, try to incorporate more dairy, but I just don't like the way that low-fat dairy tastes. And it's like, well, if there's a reason for you to eat dairy, then eat cheese, eat high-fat dairy. Like you're in a position, you're an athlete, all of your markers are good, you look healthy. Like I don't think it's going to be a big deal at all. So yeah, it's basically, you just kind of have to take an individual approach. And is saturated fat really going to hurt your health? Well, that depends on you.
Yeah, I think you have to eat excess for it to really impact, or have over 20% of your fat coming from that, right?
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, again, too, people respond.
I approach it with just keeping my fat on the lower end. Yeah. Around 20% of my calories. Yeah. Because that really gives my body the fats that it needs without flooding it.
Yeah, and people respond differently. So I have worked with plenty of individuals that could be considered hyper responders. Even small amounts of saturated fat shoot their LDL through the roof. That is expected. And there's other people where it doesn't seem to have that impact. Me, for one, when I was eating a lot of saturated fat in the form of coconut and cheese and whole fat dairy, I was probably getting something like 60 grams or more per day from that. And yet my LDL was quite literally at a 64 at that time. And so the saturated fat didn't seem to have that big of an impact on me, especially not within the context of my lifestyle at that time, where I was being very, very active and I was maintaining a very lean physique.
Mine shoots up.
Yeah, she's a hyper responder. So I guess the big thing is that there's a lot of woo around these things that doesn't appreciate context. It likes to use dichotomous thinking and look at it black and white. Either it's good or it's bad. You'll find that on both sides. You'll find people that say, you know, saturated fat's been demonized forever, but it's all bullcrap. Let's just eat all the saturated fat. That's a stupid position. Then you find people that say saturated fat's causing heart disease. It like needs to be eliminated completely. That's a stupid position. People are like, PUFAs are toxic. Stupid position. Eat as many PUFAs as you can. Stupid position. Balance.
Yeah. It's hard though.
I know, it is
It's not
hard.
sexy.
No, it's not. And it's much easier to scream these loud messages that people can grasp onto rather than,
Telling the truth.
telling the truth and being nuanced with the discussion.
Yep.
So with that being said, if you like the content of this video, then awesome. That's what we're trying to do. And if you know someone who's confused about fats and you want to give them just a short, more nuanced discussion about that, then send this video their way. Thanks, everyone.